navigating public cloud and how we would take an approach to that. A lot of our customers come to us these days because they are trying to figure out what to choose. In fact, we had a question in the last session from the back. How do we determine what public cloud to go to? And by way of a little bit of introduction, I've been at Rackspace about 2 years. My background is primarily larger systems integration firms. And I joined Rackspace about the time that Jeff was showing, if you were in our last presentation, about the time that Rackspace was starting to investigate or look at moving their management capabilities to the public cloud. And so over the last couple of years, as we've brought on AWS, we've brought on Google Cloud, it has become more and more common for customers to say, there's a lot out there, so which do I choose? We're not seeing as much customer questioning of moving to the public cloud. There are still certain industries and certain types of application workloads that don't present well in the public cloud. But most of our customers that come to us for public cloud are coming for the reasons that are shown here. A lot of agility around as-a-service offerings, being able to have a transformative elasticity around the demand of the resources, being able to spin things up, spin things down, being able to take advantage of the existing capabilities around governance, whether that's billing and cost control, whether it's security, et cetera. The geographic coverage, every presentation I think that we've had has talked about the fact that this is a geographic sort of a movement now, that you want the capabilities of your cloud where your customers are, where you are, where your business is. And then finally, the last point, which cannot be minimized, is innovation through scale. Yeah. The major hyperscale providers that we work with are pouring billions into their cloud. Not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, not millions, but billions into their innovation. And they're bringing change and bringing capability to the public cloud environments at a blistering pace. And that allows you to be able to take advantage of their capabilities at scale along with every other customer that they have that is doing it. So it's the ability for you to ride the coattails of these organizations. As you know probably by now, if you've been here for any period of time today, we support 3 major hyperscale providers. We support Amazon Web Services, we support Microsoft Azure, and we support Google Cloud. I am the Azure evangelist. I work in our Microsoft Cloud practice talking to customers about what makes sense for Azure and soon to be Azure Stack. Eric, as you know, is on the AWS side. Our evangelism effort is talking to our customers about what makes the clouds great. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that you understand what we're after is a fanatical experience in the public cloud. So even though there's some good-natured banter back and forth, and even though Eric has chosen the wrong cloud to align himself with, it's okay.
He's the Azure evangelist.
It's okay.
The AWS evangelist position was taken.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. There's a lot of good-natured banter that goes back and forth. But at the end of the day, I think you'll understand that it is really about how do we choose and is it going to make sense to have more than one. And so in order for us to sort of walk through this, we thought we'd spend a couple of minutes and give you some bullets around how we view these hyperscale providers.
Yeah, so let's talk, let's start out, first and foremost is AWS services. AWS services has been around the longest. They're the largest public cloud provider. At one time, and it may have changed lately, the statistic was they were 14 times larger than the next closest providers combined. They've been doing this for quite a while, so they have a lot of expertise. They're the most mature cloud with the most number of services. The joke around our offices is AWS comes out with a new service or improvement every 7 seconds, which isn't quite true, but it feels that way. Their services are very robust, very mature. They're the leading innovator in platform as a service offerings. When you start getting into platform as a service, things like, there's just a whole number of them, but you get into where you're not dealing with infrastructure, you're dealing with just a platform, you're dealing with an API endpoint, something like Lambda or DynamoDB or and just on and on and on, and I can name tons of them. So they're the leading innovator on that. They provide easy access to tremendous scale. One of the things about cloud in general, and AWS specifically, is they're the leveler, aren't they? They basically give the ability for 2 guys in a garage to compete with enterprise-sized companies. because they have access to the same infrastructure, same power, and they're only paying for what they use. They don't have to deal with this capital expense up front. They just deal with what they use. So they provide easy access to tremendous scale of storage, of compute power, of services. And finally, the new partnership between AWS and VMware, which is, this is huge, right? Because if I were to go around the room and say, how many of y'all are on, well, let's just do it. How many of y'all use VMware? Okay, a good amount of people in the room. So if you're able to take that same technology and use it in the cloud, you're able to, same services, and go across. It's kind of like Azure Stack without Azure Stack. I'm just throwing that out there. But what you get is you get this ability to use the same type of interface and technology on AWS. So that's AWS, if you want to talk about Azure.
Absolutely. So if you're a Microsoft loyalist, and many of our customers are, what we refer to as an enterprise loyalist, you have invested a huge amount in Microsoft technologies, Microsoft capabilities. You have a relationship with Microsoft. And so you want to leverage that existing investment. You may very well have that investment in Microsoft VM technology. You may very well have that investment in ASP.NET and the other .NET framework technologies. But that is a big draw for customers to come to Microsoft Azure. If you are doing a lot with Active Directory and you're looking for integration with the Active Directory ecosystem, that is another strong, compelling feature of Azure. In fact, we have many, many customers come to us specifically for the ability to do Active Directory integration because they want to be able to promote or push out their AD work even beyond their premise environment, even beyond Azure onto third-party SaaS operating environments. Microsoft has a rich data management and analytics capability. If you're not familiar with things like Power BI, Azure Data Lake, etc., these are technologies that Microsoft has continued to refine and introduce to allow its customers to manage this massive amount of data that continues to inflow into these companies. It's got broad operating system choice, so I'll be the first one to tell you, I have 5 Azure subscriptions that belong to me. There's not a single Windows VM or Windows technology in any of those Azure subscriptions. Every one of my VMs that I run is running some variant of Linux, whether it's Red Hat or whether it's Ubuntu, etc. However, I am running Microsoft technology such as SQL Server, .NET, etc. on those Linux capabilities. So if you're looking for support for CentOS, Red Hat, Ubuntu, etc., then Azure is a great platform. Right now, I think the amount is somewhere close to 30% of the existing VM landscape in Azure is Linux. And Linux is actually the fastest growing VM creation environment inside Azure. It far outstrips what Windows is doing today. And then finally, if you come from a Microsoft developer ecosystem, and unfortunately you didn't get to see Natalia's complete demonstration, but the integration with Microsoft's developer tools, and Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio Team Services, all of those various and sundry capabilities, is an amazing testament to what happens when you put a bunch of smart guys from Microsoft across their public cloud talking not only to the operations folks but to the developers. And that's really the environment both Eric and I come from, is development backgrounds. It's extraordinarily compelling.
So Google Cloud is the other offering that we have, and this is new, right? We announced this week, and it's going into beta soon. And Google Cloud has a lot to offer as well. Number one, they're the world's largest software-defined network. And you kind of say, well, what does that mean? Okay. Well, one of the things, and I learned this is fairly new to me, Google owns their entire network. They own their fiber. And they obviously control it through software-defined networking. It's huge. And if you think about Google Cloud, while Google Cloud is fairly new, Google infrastructure is not. They've been around for a long time, haven't they? So they're pretty good. They know what they're doing with networking and such. So second thing is they're a leading innovator in big data. If you think about how they've been doing analytics, I mean, just something as simple as Google Analytics, and they probably wouldn't want me saying it's simple because I couldn't do it, but something as simple as Google Analytics and how they've been dealing with that kind of amount of data, they're experts in big data. And they're taking that, that kind of software options and giving it out on a public cloud. Performance and engineering sophistication. It's kind of funny when we talk about, a lot of developers like Google because they kind of think that they come from a developer standpoint. And they are sophisticated. They've been doing a lot of, their networking, they home grow some of their networking techniques and some of their hardware and things like that to have a sophisticated network that, offers, all kinds of options. Security at scale is part of Google's DNA. Now, this is kind of interesting. If you think about the way Google's done it, and this is the way they did their network, and then they take and say, okay, now we're going to give it to you guys to do it this way. But their network is such that all data at rest is encrypted. It's not, hey, I want my data encrypted. It's, hey, my data is encrypted. It's non-negotiable. That's your data is encrypted for security. All data in transit is encrypted. Again, not an option. That's just the way it is. So written right into the very base code of everything they do is security. And finally, a simplified cost structure and pricing. Pricing on demand, when you kind of get this idea, hey, we're going to go on demand. I used it for 2 hours, I'm going to pay for 2 hours. It's not always that simple with any of the cloud providers. You can't say this. So Google's really working at the approach of saying, hey, we're going to make our price structure easier and simplified to help you guys out. And that's the Google Cloud.
So a lot of our customers, many of our customers are coming to us as a multi-cloud customer, or at least they have envisioned in their minds that they want to be multi-cloud. They want to be able to take advantage of the geographic availability of all of the different providers where that is possible. They have business requirements that may drive them to multi-cloud, whether that is the fact that they are on AWS and have acquired a company that is in Azure and maybe acquired another company that is using Google Cloud Platform, which happens quite a bit. They are looking for provider-specific features, so they may very well have invested heavily in Lambda, but at the same time, they are also looking to take advantage of things like Power BI in the Azure space or something in the GCP platform that makes sense. And then finally, many customers come and look at disaster recovery. I'm sitting in AWS and I have some issue or something that is driving me to want to be able to fail over into or burst over into another cloud. Maybe that is a business mandate, maybe that is something else that has driven them to that, but that DR story is extraordinarily important. And I would venture to say that the majority of customers that Eric and I are talking with are investigating multiple clouds. They simply are. It's just simply part of the conversation. So the big question is always, how do you choose? Now, I want to take a quick stopping point, and I want to point out one very important thing. Neither one of us is wearing a jacket.
That's right.
We don't wear a jacket because we're the guys that are actually in the trenches doing the work, right? I mean, we love to tell you how things are going to work. We love to tell you what it is, but we are not salespeople. That's not what we do. We evangelize the capability of public cloud. And I kind of half-jokingly make the comment about the coat because we're the guys that really roll up our sleeves and sit with customers on a daily basis talking to them about why they should go to one or the other.
Don't let the button-up fool you. I am AWS.
Yeah.
So Jeff will tell you he's just glad I'm wearing pants. So
yeah,
I do AWS. That's where I love. So
yeah, the joke is always for us at Rackspace, especially those of us in the trenches, business casual means boxer shorts and a bathrobe. But at this kind of a conference, that's kind of frowned on. So we're all dressed up for you here. So let's talk about then some of the things that Eric and I have both over the past period of time have sort of developed some criteria, some ideas about how to go through this choice process. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to take advantage of expertise, and we would obviously like for you to take advantage of our expertise. Rackspace hires guys like me and Eric for the sole purpose of helping our customers make the right choice and being able to provide that fanatical experience that you come to expect from Rackspace and other things. So if you're a dedicated hosting customer or if you're one of our private cloud customers, we can give you the same capability. So what do we give you? We give you experience operating at scale. There are a lot of cloud management providers out there. Oh, you were doing the number. Okay, you do the number.
I got it.
You can just leave it up there, right, the whole time. So experience operating at scale means that we have done this in the large. There are a lot of managed service provider companies out there that have done it in the onesie and twosie space. We've done it for thousands of customers. We've done it in our own data centers. We've built our own data centers, and we know what it's like to operate at scale. We bring in expert guidance. We groom it internally. We hire it from the outside on the major cloud platforms. If you take a look at the number of experts that we have walking around our company in Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure, it's thousands of people that are available to be able to help you figure out what's the right choice.
I'm gonna interrupt you there.
Go ahead.
When you talk about bringing in experienced employees on this. I made the joke earlier, like, they add a new service every 7 seconds. But one of the hardest things to do on any of the clouds is to stay informed. And a lot of times you're like, well, we'll just hire internally. We'll hire someone to do that. But you're talking about a full-time job just to know what the next best thing is. And it doesn't mean that you're going to use the next best thing, but to be aware of the next best thing. Because sometimes the next best thing, and I can tell you story after story of where, on Amazon, using our Aurora over a MySQL server can save you thousands of dollars. And so being aware, and so that's why we encourage, if you can do it internally, that's a great story. But if you can't, it's critical to partner with a team like Rackspace that are committed to saying, okay, we're going to stay on top of what's going on. And it's just critical that you have that knowledge at your fingertip. Do you like that? Sorry. Please,
it never gets old.
Yeah,
does
I know.
It? So
it's still funny to me.
Fully managed services, right? So we fully manage all of these services from cradle to grave for our customers, right? I mean, that is what you're after. You're after the ability for us to come in and help you plan and assess. You're absolutely after a company that can help you not only migrate but manage, and then the ability for us to continually optimize as we go along. It's just part of the process. The migration assistance is huge. We have the ability to help you get the workloads that you have today into the cloud, so we can give you that expertise. And then finally, security and governance services, very, very critically important. We have an entire group of people that deals with managed security. We have governance experts that know compliance and know customer governance, know again, billing, cost control, those kind of things. So taking advantage of expertise is a key piece of it.
So the next thing you want to talk about is conducting a readiness assessment. And when you're making a move to the cloud, sometimes like, look, let's just spin some up and see what happens and let's go for it. That's how I got into the cloud. I remember the company I was working for, they came in, and this is 2006, 2007, and they came and said, we want to try out cloud. We've got a new website. Use AWS. Go. There was no research. There was no nothing. And I think a lot of companies fall prey to that. One of the critical things you have to do is you need to know what you're working with. Conduct a readiness assessment internally. Understand what you're talking about. Understand what you're working with. The first thing you want to look at is business goals. When you think about your business goals for doing a readiness assessment, you want to know, okay, look, these, here's what we're looking to do. We're looking to grow this much in this amount of time. We're looking to, get rid of that website and add this website. We're looking to add 3 new products in a year. So you want to understand what are the business goals and how does the cloud provider that I'm looking at match those business goals. Existing workloads. Again, this kind of goes back to understanding existing workloads. One of the funny things in like Kent said, we're practitioners. On a daily basis, if we're not out speaking, we're in the trenches talking to customers. And one of the funny things that I run into is when you're talking to them, it's as you're going through, okay, you get everything signed, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then the customer will go, oh yeah, there's another 7 websites we need on that as well. I was like, what? Because one, they didn't remember, or the right people weren't on the phone, but understanding, here's our workloads. This is Windows, this is Linux, this is whatever. We're looking at taking this serverless, that kind of thing. So having a good understanding of what your workloads look like, while it may seem silly, you'd be surprised how many people don't know when they come here. When you say, well, do you guys have a database? Oh, yeah, I guess we do. It's like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about that. And we try to pull that out, but sometimes it's tough. Workload value. This is kind of an important thing. When you think workload value, if you're thinking, you know what, I've got this website and we're going to deprecate it we're going to end of life it in 3 months. Is it worth it to migrate? 3 months, probably not. We're going to deprecate it or end of life it in a year. Well, it might be. But you want to look at the value of that. If we can host it for another year at this amount, because we're not going to do anything to it, then we want to talk about workload value. We want to understand what does that workload value to us. Internal skill sets. Obviously, this makes sense. Now, Kent would love to have you believe if it's Microsoft, you go to Azure. That's not the case necessarily at all. And but again, we'll say that. But workload. What are your internal skill sets? You can run Windows on AWS. I believe you can run it on GCP.
Absolutely.
And but what are your skills? If you are big into, let's say, Visual Studio, maybe it makes sense to work with those tools. If you're a CLI guy, you love the command line. That's me. I love a command line. Man, I could do anything in AWS with a command line, almost with one eye closed. And you can do that. So you different. What are your skill sets, and where's that going to match? One of the things I say about cloud is you can pretty much do anything on any of the clouds. But is it better on a certain cloud of what you're doing, and is it better for you on a certain cloud? So your options are really limitless. And finally, timeline. And that doesn't always affect, because sometimes moving from a cloud, it may take the same amount of time for me to move to Azure as it would to AWS, as it would to GCP. But sometimes there's some limitation that's worth looking at. Would we have to modify this code or modify this application to go to this cloud where we wouldn't this cloud, and do we have time for that? So these are some of the factors you want to look at. There's plenty more, but these are some good ideas to start with when you're doing that readiness assessment. And that's really handy to kind of have that together, even as you come to Rackspace, or when somebody to have that ready for them.
I think that the next piece of it is really about comparing features. I mean, right? You'd agree.
Yeah.
You kind of look at the features, and we joke back and forth about, oh, well, Google's got this, or Amazon has got this, or Azure's got this. But really and truthfully, the feature capability of the provider that you're picking is really, really of paramount importance.
Yep.
Geographic availability, we've talked about that. If you really need to be in a place where the provider you're thinking does not have a region, that could be the dead stop for you. This was acutely a problem recently for customers that wanted to be in Germany and needed to be able to adhere to compliance rules around data sovereignty, et cetera, but there was no presence in the German space. No surprise that Rackspace built a data center there, and Microsoft built a data center there. The technology support, this kind of goes back to the things we've been talking about what is your internal skill set like, what is your capability around being able to support what you have in those clouds. Mm-hmm. Now, the reality is that almost every cloud supports almost every technology at a base level that we would use. Platform affinity. This one's kind of a funny one because it has not only business pieces, but technical pieces. If you're a Microsoft Enterprise customer and you have an enterprise agreement with Microsoft and they are literally handing you Azure credit after Azure credit after Azure credit, that may very well sway your decision about what to do because it's a business economics situation. Yeah. You might actually have platform affinity because of your skill set. You may have hired, all these old Visual Basic programmers that have been around forever, or .NET developers or whatever it is. You may find that there is an affinity for that. I did say Visual Basic. Man. Notice I didn't say Quick Basic.
I apologize.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm trying to be good about it. And again, the business economics, which we touched on. I mean, there are simply going to be cases where you can run the numbers and one becomes a clearer choice for the money.
Well, and when you look at that, the money is not always just straight up, here's what my load would cost me.
Right. It's not acquisition.
Right. So if I do apples to apples, here's what it looks like on AWS, here's what it looks like on Microsoft, but then you have to add in merger, right? What's a merger? How's it going? I just make things up. So migrating is the word I was going for. You have to add in, what does it cost to migrate? Number two, what does it cost to manage? What is that going to cost me? It may be cheaper to run in Cloud A, but it's going to cost me more to manage it. So B actually looks better because it's less to manage. So there's a lot of things you want to look at when you're looking at business economics.
Well, most organizations are used to doing the total cost of ownership, discussion anyway, and nowhere is that more important than the cloud, especially because you don't want the sticker shock, right? We all know of people or companies that have run their stuff into the public cloud and they've gotten the bill at the end of the first month that looks like the bill they got when their daughter started using or before unlimited texting.
Yeah.
They got an $800 texting bill. That's the kind of sticker shock we're trying to avoid.
Well, and that's and you said the slide, but that's something, let me throw this out there, and some of you may go, and some may not, but just, and we'll talk about this a little in the next session, but just simply lifting what you have and dropping in the cloud is not instant savings. In fact,
what?
Exactly. Sometimes it is more expensive because you're not taking advantage of the cloud, advantages. So when you're looking at that business economics, you have to evaluate how fast can we optimize and transform. And again, we'll talk about those words and what they mean cloud-wise in the next session, but those economics are critical. Because sticker shock is a big thing, and we see that. I see that a lot of people going to the cloud. And when I sit down with the customer, I say, okay, I tell them what I just told you. But that's an important thing to note.
So the next piece for us that's incredibly important is conducting a pilot. I cannot tell you the number of organizations that we run across that are considering one cloud or the other and have never even attempted to push a workload into the clouds they're considering. Right? So one of the things that we advocate is you really need to try each one of them. You need to look at what makes sense for you. If you're really trying to decide between AWS and Azure, it is almost no cost to go try them both out for 30-day period.
Same
right?
with GCP.
Push a workload in, try it, run it, see how your team is working with it, see how your staff comes find, but do the pilot. But it's important to approach the pilot in a very, very methodical way. Define the objectives. We talked about business goals. Define what the objectives are. What are you proving out? It's one thing to run a POC, but if you're running a POC to prove out that the public cloud actually works, don't waste your time. Right? If you're looking to prove out how your organization will operate in the public cloud, that's perfect, right? Maybe you're trying to figure out, how does my development organization work? Does my DevOps chain actually fit in this cloud? Do I even have a DevOps chain? What would have to change? Assemble a team, right? So get a team of people, right? Find the people in your organization, and there's always generally somebody who is champing at the bit to go try this out, to go look at this, right? And it's not always the people that you might expect. What we find with a lot of organizations is that their business units are driving this, not IT. Right. And so that makes for some very, very interesting conversations.
That's how I got into it.
That's
correct.
It wasn't
IT at all, yeah.
Select the candidate workload. And I've heard both sides of the argument, right? Select something that is so high risk and so visible and so mission critical that all eyes are on it, that all resources get directed to it, and it can't help but be a success. And then the opposite side is pick something that is so low risk and so, innocuous that if you do have issues with it, nobody's going to lose their job moving it. There's probably valid points on both sides of that scale. The reality is probably somewhere near the middle. But there's no point, and Eric made this comment earlier, there's no point in pushing something into the public cloud that you don't think you're going to run long term, that you don't think that you're going to actually have value out of. There's no reason to even experiment with it. Then finally, then determine the approach. Take a look at the approach you're doing for the pilot. Is it with your customers? Is it with your internal people? Is it a combination of both? But take a look at the approach of how you're going to actually conduct this pilot. Are you testing CI/CD, and do you really want your developers to be deploying on a regular basis? Is that the thing you're after? But define that approach. You have to perform the migration. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've seen companies that have put it on a whiteboard and put it in a white paper and put it in some PowerPoint deck and said, okay, we're ready to go. Let's go ahead and move to production. We got this. They've never once done a live migration into the public cloud. Because what you will find, and we find this all the time is, and we still find it, you'll push something into the cloud and you'll figure out, whoa, I didn't realize we had to change that. I didn't realize we needed to fix that. So perform the migration. And then finally, critically important is to go back and validate the results and validate them across your organization, right? Take a look at the lessons that you learned. Actually use that pilot for its intended purpose, which is to make the determination, is that the cloud we want to go to?
Yeah, I would on the validate results, one of the things that we see a lot is, we validated the results. Well, what was the result? It worked. Oh, okay, that's great. Okay, were you able to deploy it? You know, much like we talked about CI/CD. If you don't know what CI/CD is, it's continuous integration, continuous delivery. Did it work? Or could I deploy it at all? But the second thing that I really encourage, the other things I encourage is, did it work under load?
Yep.
You know, did we, because what you then start learning is, did we know how to architect, even if it's a lift and shift? Did we take the appropriate changes or measures to adapt to cloud technology? Because it's not, in some ways, it's not, oh, it's just the same as a network in my basement. It's not. Cloud is different. And so did we take advantage of, at least in the lift and shift, the right networking types so that it works under load, and can we restore it? Can we recover it if it dies? And I can't tell you how many times, I mean, just in general, that's a good practice. We've tried our disaster recovery process. No, we've got a process in place. Have you ever tested it? Well, no, but it's in place. Okay, well, test it. And these are the things, you know, because you might find, hey, it's easier for me to recover this particular type of data on AWS or on Azure or GCP, something like that. So the metrics are critical, and try to think of all the different metrics and ways of testing your load as you can, your workload as you can.
Right. So in closing, what I do want to say is I want to make sure you understand, we know, because we do this all the time, that choosing the public cloud can be complex. It's not as simple as saying, oh, one day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to go to Azure. I've decided Azure is the coolest thing and I'm going to go and I'm just going to do it. It's a lot more complex than that. But we do have expertise that will help. I mean, you've seen these slides before. You know the numbers. Yep. We have experts crawling the hallways on all three of the hyperscale providers that we use. But one of the things I do want to point out as we close out is that, and you touched on it earlier, the secret is, or at least the unspoken, you know, sort of statement that we want to make is, it's probably not going to be difficult to make the right choice. Right? I mean, in other words, you're probably not going to pick the wrong cloud. The parity of it has gotten to the point now where AWS, Azure, Google, we're all keeping pace with each other. Later, as you'll look at in the SmackDown, again, as though it's good-natured fun, what we will tell you is that our goal is to try and get you to have the best experience that you can have regardless of the public cloud platform. So if you're a dedicated customer, VMware customer, as I said earlier, we want you to have the same experience across the public cloud. Now, what we've tried to do is we've tried to leave enough time here at the end, although we completely blew our time out yesterday, just to have some questions. So we love questions. We love answering them. So if you have them, please ask. And everybody's like, is it?
Yes, sir.
Right here.
So let's say you have a web site running on a server or in a public cloud server or whatever, database and all that, and you want to move it to the cloud, and you come to Rackspace, and so if we're going to implement through Rackspace, we're going to get the same service, whether we're doing it on Google or AWS or Azure. Would you look at the application and figure out how it would be implemented on all three platforms and tell us which one would be best based on that? I mean, how do you break down the application to determine how it gets implemented in the cloud?
I'll take the first crack
Yeah,
at
go
it.
ahead, yeah.
So we would definitely take a look at the application itself. So I'll tell you some of the things that I look at, and I'll get a little bit in the weeds. If you came to me and said that I have a traditional ASP.NET application running on IIS, right, Internet Information Server, running on a Windows server, then I might have some questions around, well, do you want to stay on a VM? Do you want to manage a VM? Do you want an IaaS solution? Or do you want to go to a PaaS-based solution? If you want to go to PaaS and literally pick your ASP.NET up and move it, then Azure might be a better choice. But if you're actually wanting to stay on a VM environment, and depending on what you need the other pieces of your ecosystem to do, AWS might be a better choice. And it is getting into the application workload. We are long past the point at which just simply looking at compute, network, and storage is a valid reason to look at a public cloud. Those are commodities, right? You can go to anybody and get those. What you're after is, what does your workload look like as I'm moving it? And more importantly, what does it look like when I'm operating it? And so guys like me and Eric would absolutely sit down and go through, which is why, you know, people who have development backgrounds sort of get involved in these discussions, because we know what it's like to deploy those. Go ahead if you have.
I think, and I may take a little different angle just simply because I think the way maybe you ask the question is, how does Rackspace help you kind of navigate that? Generally, when we have someone come to us, they've chosen already, or they think they have. And hey, we want AWS, or hey, we want. So you'll talk to one of our salespeople, and sometimes the salespeople go, let's look at a couple of these, and they'll talk to one of the solution architects for one of the different ones. But a lot of times when they come to me in AWS, and I'll be sitting down, and there's been a couple of times, and to be honest, not terribly often, but I'll look at an architecture and I'll say, this makes more sense on up till now, because GCP is fairly new, but this makes more sense on Azure. And for some different reasons that I'll be glad to talk to you about at the time. But so a lot of times they're already chosen, or they think they have. But one of the things that we have, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this externally or not, but I'm going to anyways. We have this thing called the fanatical no, and what that means is we want to do the best for you, even if it means we push back on you. And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to say, here's why this works better. And I'm going to tell you, and obviously, and I'm going to try to guide them and say, this reason, this is going to work better on Azure, this is going to work better on GCP, or yeah, you're in the right place, and we can help you through that process. Does that help? Sure.
Yeah, so the question, just so that everybody hears this, so the follow-up was an existing application, ASP, database, IIS, et cetera, would Rackspace be able to assist you in figuring out which one is best? And the answer is emphatically yes, absolutely.
And I would love, if you want to talk more, let's say we can go offline, I'll be glad to answer that. I want to try to get to a couple more questions if we can.
You may have to explain to Eric what ASP means, but
yeah,
it's
is it JavaScript or not?
Yeah, back here.
So. So, sorry.
That ultimately we enter a relationship with Rackspace because we trust you to help us navigate.
Yeah.
The end result may be that we will deploy on multiple clouds. My question is, how does that affect the complexity of governance for this now much more complex environment? And will you still guide us down the route of locking in with one vendor in order to simplify the management of this, or is Rackspace going to deliver management as a service delivered by Rackspace on top of the multi-cloud?
Okay.
I understand where it's all going.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So a couple questions there. Number one is if we go multi-cloud, we take it on as kind of separate approaches. So you'll have one team that's helping you with like Azure, another team's helping you with GCP, something like that. So that kind of so those would be kind of separate accounts, but you still work with the right people to help you on that. As far as the governance. Governance is, there's different, when you say governance, it can have several different things. But if you're saying, governance, what are we talking about? Okay, all right.
Yep.
So, my brain just dropped all the words I was trying to say. But identity and access, so obviously that's going to depend on which service you're using. But because they offer, for instance, Azure can connect to an on-premise AD, and AWS can, and Google can, and so you have some overlap that can be done there. And yes, we can help out to a degree. Where that line is, I couldn't exactly give you at the moment, but we can help out in the overall picture of it. So. Dan, if you want to add to that.
Yeah,
please.
so I was just going to say that we've only got a few seconds here left, but it's the reason that we build offerings like managed identity services, managed security, because we're going across our entire ecosystem to provide you that capability. And I would tell you that it's a deep conversation, it's a long conversation, but it's well worth having because we will help you get to the right place. And it won't be just to make our lives easier. Our goal is to make your life easier and your life better. And I know that sounds like a sales pitch. I probably need my jacket on at that
probably.
point. So we are at time here. We're going to be here for the SmackDown, and we're also going to be roving around. So please come talk to us. If you want just to come even grab a card so that you can have a conversation with us later on, be happy to do it. But it is incredibly important to us that you take advantage of our expertise. That's why we're here. That's why Rackspace employs us.
Right.
So
Excellent.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
being up here, man.
So we're going to take a 2-minute break, and then we're going to get started with the SmackDown. I know you're looking forward to that. I know you're excited about that. And so if you'll give us just a few moments, we'll start that, and we'll be right back.